Mr. Suroi, thank you for this interview and welcome to Civil Media.
A pleasure.
Let's begin with the most pressing issue, the Kosovo-Serbian relations. Is dialogue possible now, especially after Banska attack on 24th of September?
Well, it's always necessary, and especially after you have such an escalation in violence, it's necessary to have dialogue. Of course, the question is what the dialogue should be focused on, and it has to deal with multiple issues and multiple choices at the same time. So one of them has to do with actually having legal responsibility for the development in Banska, because this was a paramilitary attack in which there's a degree of responsibility of the Serbian state. There needs to be proper legal procedures against the leader of that paramilitary unit, Mr. Radojcic, who acknowledged that he was leading the unit. But there needs to be at the same time measures to create a better situation for the people in that part of Kosovo within a political development that includes the citizens in decision making.
Right, I see. We saw how much justice the Serbian state can issue to the one who reported himself as the perpetrator. But what needs to happen? Looks like the European Union is, so to speak, result-oriented and pressing for more results and making announcements that there are agreements between Republic of Kosovo and Republic of Serbia, whilst we only see deterioration of the situation. What needs to actually happen?
Yes, it's a strange development in which you say that there's a normalization process going on, and then you have Banska, which is quite abnormal. It does not give a sense of normality. I think the European Union is describing the situation not really close to reality. And so claiming that there's an agreement while President Vučić says that he does not support an agreement, that he supports one part of the agreement, but he does not support the other part of the agreement. I think we ought to believe Mr. Vučić rather than what Mr. Borrell describes as an agreement.
I see. Well, before the Banska incident, do you think that Brussels also bears some level of responsibility because it was practically cuddling Belgrade and Vučić?
Of course.
And also put the Prime Minister of Kosovo, Mr. Kurti, on thin ice practically. Do we have any dialogue maybe on the relation between Priština and Brussels in regards to improvement of Kosovo's relationship and status?
Well, I think there was, as I said, we have to believe when President Vučić says that he does not support the agreement, we have to acknowledge that he is not supporting the agreement. And when he says, I accept points 5, 6, and 7, but I do not accept 1, 2, 3, and 4, we have to accept that this is his position. We should not wish away his position, because that's not the way you conduct negotiations. So if President Vučić says that there is no agreement, we have to believe that there is no agreement and that there needs to be an agreement reached. I think because of this kind of rather abnormal attitude that has been dealt with the agreement, the logical consequence of it is that the Serbian polity can test further the resilience and the resistance of the West, the European Union, and NATO. Do not forget that in May of this year, there was a violent attack on NATO soldiers in various municipalities in the north against NATO, against journalists, etc. and there were 90 NATO soldiers who were injured in these attacks. So this is a testing of how much NATO will be responsive to violence. How many soft spots NATO has. And so I think Serbia has tested quite well for its own purposes how much resistance there is both in NATO and in the EU. And Banjska was a logical conclusion that ended not well for that political option.
Still in the Banjska incident or attack area, there are quite a few experts who are indicating the strong Russian influence in the whole affair. What is the Russian influence in the Serbia-Kosovo relations and in the Western Balkans in general?
Russia has not now, but for many years, adopted a clear attitude that has low investment and high returns. And so it does not need to do any more jobs than what the spoilers in the Western Balkans are doing, from Mr. Dodik to here, to what we've seen in Northern Macedonia with the attack on parliament, what we've seen in Montenegro. So there are players who will do that either gratis or for small remunerations. And so does this go to the advantage of Russia? Of course it does, because it wants the Western Balkans as an unresolved conflict and further instigating identity issues. It is a replication of the friction line between the Euro-Atlantic community and the Euro-Asian community that is the friction line in the war between Ukraine and Russia, that is the Russian invasion in Ukraine. And therefore we are in part of the Western Balkans are simply playing ground for replicating this kind of friction line.
Right, indeed. It's a well-adopted strategy of the Russian policy. Every disadvantage in the West is a good advantage for the Russian side. As simple as that, and not as simple as that either. Regarding the policy within the Republic of Kosovo, could Prime Minister Kurti do something or anything better in regards to the Serbia-Kosovo dialogue, especially in the light of one of your recent statements, if I paraphrase well, that we see a struggle between two stubbornnesses in this story. Is there any improvement there? Do we see some perspective in the side from the Kosovo perspective?
Well, my analogy of stubbornnesses was that there's a competition between the stubborn reality, as it is, and the description that the European Union gives to this reality, or to the reality it pursues. And I think the stubbornness of reality is winning. And so we are living in an unfinished conflict. And we have to see this within that light. And so the question is not about only normalizing and only trying to devise some policies of integration into the European Union, because that is not in the cards yet, but also of how to integrate end of conflict into it. And the end of conflict, or ending conflicts, is done first initially by recognizing that the conflicts have not finished, or that other ones are being instigated or opened. One simple example is Montenegro, a NATO member that was very close to integration into the European Union, or very further ahead in integration, that suddenly has an internal identity conflict being driven by the outside. Let us not forget that North Macedonia, when it goes from one obstacle, it goes from internal regulations from 2001, then suddenly emerges with another problem, which is how the neighbors will perceive it. Right. And then once you solve that with one neighbor, then you have another neighbor saying, well, you know, you have some history books that I want to look into. And so this is ad continuum into redefining identity issues that frankly will not probably be resolving the situation of whether these countries will become functioning democracies that are able to integrate into the European Union or not.
Good basis for thinking and actually broadening the prospects regarding the stubbornnesses in the Balkans. Well, the Serbia-Kosovo tensions, dialogue, and so on has a great impact on the neighborhood, especially in North Macedonia. What are the perspectives of the situation in the Balkans, especially the security situation, especially having in mind that we also have Ukraine war, we have Kremlin being interested in meddling with the internal affairs, and so on. What do you have a regional perspective looking at North Macedonia? Probably?
Well, in the past 10 or 15 years, we've had this mantra of 4 European freedoms established in the Western Balkans. That if the Western Balkan countries adopt the 4 European freedoms, freedom of movement, of investment, of capital, etc., then it will. But the 4 freedoms are a product of a historical transformation of Western Europe after the Second World War. And in order to get to these 4 freedoms, there needs to be a 5th freedom that needs to be addressed, which is freedom from fear. The Western Balkans is still in an unfinished conflict zone. The people of the Western Balkans need to be in a situation in which they awake every day without the sense that this region is maybe not very stable, or that maybe next year there will be a war in my neighborhood. And this is something that does not allow the other freedoms to progress. So we need to, both the European Union, NATO, and the Western Balkan countries need to address this issue today. And that is how to create a security umbrella for the Western Balkans so that the people of the Western Balkans feel confident about their own security, that what is happening in Ukraine and Russia, what is happening in Gaza, does not reflect itself in the Western Balkans, that this is a region that has decided to live in peace and therefore will adopt the 4 freedoms. And it has the instruments, the umbrella that secures that they do not go into violence again.
But many people might say that Serbia is actually waging a hybrid war against Kosovo. And in that regards, I don't see, at least personally, I don't see any possibility for continuation of a true dialogue that will have positive effects, and I don't see a possibility of freedom from fear, as you.
No, well, we need to address we have to grab the bulls by the horns, and so the question is this: 4 out of the 6 Western Balkan countries are living in an unfinished conflict zone or with identity instigations. And so we had a triangle, which was Kosovo, Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, because whilst Kosovo and Serbia live in an unfinished conflict and incomplete states, because they have not defined their mutual relations, Bosnia and Herzegovina lives in a peace accord that is not a legitimate constitutional order. And therefore, there's a continuous unfinished conflict in Bosnia and Herzegovina that is being continuously instigated. And so to these three, to this triangle, we've had Montenegro being added in the past years about the identity of the people in Montenegro. And this is a redefining from within of this country that will eventually at some point get to address also, is this a country that wants to be in NATO, wants to be in the European Union, wants to cooperate with its neighbors, or wants to be part of the Serbian world? So if this is the situation as it is now, and added to it, we have continuous questions about the identity of people in Northern Macedonia, of one or the other.
Yeah.
And to add to this, in Albania, which in the past months or year has attempted to create itself or within the leadership to address itself as the center of defining what the Albanians should think or do or how to behave, then we have a problem that is not conducing to freedom from fear. And therefore we have to address this question from a point that does not, grassroots, bottom up, let's have people love themselves and cooperate, etc. But from up to say, okay, this is a region that is of special interest to the Western Alliance, to the West. It is part of the West. It needs to have a mechanisms of protection that countries agreed to, and that is undeniably a NATO umbrella. That how that will be arranged within countries is an issue to be debated. There are options of how to do it. There are ways to do it, but there needs to be a historical decision of where this place is. We cannot be continuously wondering, the descriptions, this is the crossroads between East and West. No, this is not the crossroads of East. The crossroads of East and West is Istanbul.
That's right.
And
that's absolutely right.
And so this is West. And all the cultures are welcome into it. And within this century, we will see not only Eastern and Western cultures as we have known them in terms of Islam and various languages. We will see Far Eastern. We will see Indian subcontinent people living here because there's not going to be many people willing to work here. And so we already see Bangladeshis and Pakistanis and people from India coming here, and some of them will be staying there. The people who Mr. Rama has invited to go to Italy from Africa, some of them will be staying there. Some of the people from Afghanistan will be staying there. We have to understand that as Europe, we will be as multicultural as Berlin is at some point. And there's nothing, it's something very natural to us. We were born multicultural, it's nothing new, except that we have to expand, that there will be people of different colors and much more different civilizations that we have been living in.
In that, and especially and of course in a wider context, what is, and it is not a trick question, I assure you, what's your opinion of the Serbian president, Mr. Vučić? Can he be trusted at any level?
Well, the question is not whether he should be trusted. The question is we have to take his words as they are. So if he says, I have no agreement, we have to say there's no agreement. If he says, I will never recognize Kosovo, we should say, okay, he will never recognize Kosovo. If he says, I don't consider Serbia to be part of the West, well, we should say, okay, do not, If he says we are we want to see a future with China and Russia, we have to accept it as it is, and not say, this guy is doing this for this reason or the other reason. We should not enter the reasons. It's his legitimate right, and Serbia has a legitimate right to have a president who does not want to be in the West. So it's up to the Serbian people whether this is their option. And unfortunately, this is a mutually feeding process in which if the president continuously says, we rely on Russia, then there are more people today who trust Russia in Serbia than they trust the West. They trust the European Union, or they trust the United States. And of course, this is something that needs to be addressed. You cannot hide your head, the collective West, if you will, hiding their heads in the sand and saying everything is okay. Simply by geography, Serbia is in the West. No, it is not. Geography is very important, but you have to acknowledge geography as a factor.
That's right. Well, in that context, to approach the final question, it's pretty broad and general, but still, I believe that one of the brightest minds in the Balkans could answer this question in a feasible, let's say, way. Where is Europe going?
That's a good question. Europe is, at this stage, being designed by what it is not. And it is designed by what it is not by Russia. And so the definition of Europe is entering a stage by which it is very normal that Ukraine will be the eastern border of Europe, or of Euro-Atlantic community and Euro-Asian community. And it is presently, and not only presently, but in the past 10 years, it is being also devised or designed in the way in which the Middle East sees it. If you look at it within this century or within the next 20 years, the question of Middle East is actually a question of whether it will be an extension of a kind of a European stability wing, or whether it will be a disruptive force for the next 20 years. We look at it now from the perspective of Gaza, but let's not forget that 10 years ago, there was a Syrian war.
Yeah, that's right.
And that a lot of
with millions of refugees
that were accepted by Germany and then created a new political climate in Europe that at some stage was more tolerant. When you had Angela Merkel say, bring 1 million Syrians to Germany, there's no problem.
No questions asked.
We will sort this out. And the absorption capacity of Germany is such economically. But at the same time, you had people who were disaffected, and suddenly you have AfD in Germany being the second political force, well above the Social Democrats, who were traditionally the first or the second force in Germany. So what this conflict, for example, in Gaza will be producing, among other things, is the way Europe perceives itself vis-a-vis the Middle East. And it's not a big success. It is quite the contrary. It's Europe that does not actually understand itself yet. So because Europe is a project rather than a fixed state with its borders.
Or a fixed plan.
Or a fixed plan. Since it's a project, it is within this project that actually integrating Western Balkans can be one of its greatest achievements because it is so easy to do it.
That's right.
And the fact that the European Union or the Project Europe has not reached a point of integrations it shows not the vitality to resist of the Western Balkans, but the capability of Europe to actually address these issues and to consider them as part of its own.
Thank you very much for this interview, Mr.
Thank you.
Suroi.